Hey, what's up guys? Pablo Munoz here. Today I'm going to show you how to create a plasticine material for PBR workflow, and we're going to be using ZBrush to create some of the resources, and we're going to put everything together in Adobe 3D Painter. I'm also going to show you some tips and tricks for Adobe 3D Stager, where we're going to be rendering this material. So let's jump straight into it. Alright, so this little frog that you see here on the screen, that is done all in ZBrush. This is actually a project that you can use that comes with ZBrush. I just optimized it and sent it to 3D Painter to create the material. So you can see it has all those nice kind of like fingerprints, indentations, just a green plasticine look. And I use an image from a plasticine pack that I put together that I just drag and drop to create that background. But from the same sort of setup, I went ahead and create this other type of like a bit more of a rough plasticine. This is exactly the same model, just a slightly tweaked material, and obviously a different background image. And this one as well, a little bit more colorful, and with a bit of a bad blend or badly mixed plasticine. So it's a lot of fun, and today I'm just going to show you exactly how you can achieve something like this yourself. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way. This is the model in Substance 3D Painter. And as you can see, if I just rotate the light around, there's a bit of variation in the roughness, some details as well, some indentations. If I get closer here, there will be some fingerprints as well. So yeah, it's a pretty cool, simple material. It might not be as useful for all your projects, but I think it's something cool that, if anything, is just a refreshing way of rendering your 3D models so that they look a little bit more, I would say, not realistic, but imperfect. And that's what one of the key elements of this material. But yeah, it's just a fun thing to do. So let's go ahead and jump into ZBrush. So what I have here is the default UI in ZBrush, so you can follow along, and I'm using ZBrush 2022.0.5, and this is just a plain 3D that I went ahead and click on the Make Polymesh 3D. And if I turn on the polyframe, you see it's still pretty basic. So what I want to do is create a tileable texture. And there are a couple of things that we want to do in ZBrush. One is a map for details, and another one is a map for deformation or displacement. So we're going to create two different maps. One that we're going to export as a normal map, and another one as a height map or a displacement map. And then we're going to put everything together in 3D Painter. All right, so in order to do the first map, what I'll do is I'm going to duplicate this mesh. So I now have two of the same. Bring in the gizmo and make sure that it is right in the center. And I'm going to click on this proportional scale. And I'm going to hold the Shift key until I hit the value here at the bottom of the Gizmo 3D. There we go. So number 2. So that I know that this is twice as big as the original. So if I go into solo mode, I can switch between the first one. You see, this is the original one. This is the duplicate that is double the size. And here is where the sculpting is going to happen. So let's go ahead and duplicate it one more time, right? And like I said, we're going to create some details. And let's actually call the new one details, and the other one deformation. It doesn't matter how you call it, really. Like, both are actually maps that you can export as details. I just want to show you a couple of processes. Now, the importance of the first one, that is the original size, is the one that we're going to use to frame the document so that the textures that we create are tileable. All right, so let's go ahead and rename this tile, right? Or frame, whatever you want to call it. And the next thing that we want to do in order to set up this project is to create a square document, depending on the size, obviously, of the maps that you want to create. So let's go ahead and dock the document palette on the left-hand side. And we're going to go here to this section of the document palette. I'm going to click on this Pro, which is proportional, or just to constrain the proportions of this size. And I'm going to set this to 2048 by 2048, hitting enter. And now this is going to be obviously a square format. I'm going to click on resize. I'm going to get this notification, and I'll say yes, I want to resize. And then I'm going to hold the Control and N on my keyboard, or you can also go to color, clear, and that will clear the canvas. I'm going to click and drag and then press the letter T to go back into edit mode. So now we're back in business. Now, you might not see very clearly that this is an actual square document. So another thing you can do is click on this back color and just drag it to a black color so that you can see the actual background of the document. And I'm going to use this zoom to click and drag so that you can see. All right, so this is the actual document. We can click on AA half, and you see it just kind of like frames it in there. But because it is a little bit bigger than what you can see, I'm just going to zoom in out just so that you can fully see this. And this is important because we're going to frame it based on the document size. So this is the tile. I'm also going to make sure that I have the perspective off. And as I rotate this around, I'm going to press the shift key, and that way it sort of snaps to the front angle of the camera. And then I'm going to frame this. So I'm going to click solo mode. Even though I have 3 visible, I'm in solo mode so that I only see the frame. And that's important. So I'm going to go into solo mode again. I'm pressing the letter F or click on this button here to frame. And if it doesn't frame it straight away, it's because it's framing all of the subtools. But if you click again, it should frame individual subtools. So let's go ahead and click on frame again. And now this is fitting perfectly on that document. So now that that is perfectly framed in the document, what I want to do is go to the draw palette, and here under the camera, this section right here, I can lock the camera, which I also can access from here. So I'm going to click on that one, and now the camera is locked. That's what we want. And now that it is locked, I can go back to, let's say, A half and see everything, right? So this is ideal. So now I can go to the deformation one, right? We're going to create some deformations first. And I can go ahead and also turn off polyframe, and I can subdivide this as many times as I need to create details. So if I select something like the clay brush, so BCL. So let me just actually show you. If you click on the brush palette, I'm going to click on C to filter by the clay, and I'm going to select clay brush. It's fine. So the L, so BCL. So if I go ahead and do this, I'm editing this, but it is not enough to generate details. So what I'll do is go to the geometry palette, and I'm going to subdivide this a few times, right? Let's collapse this one so we have more real estate to play with. 263 points. Let's do a few more. 1 million polygons. Yeah, so that's plenty. All right. So now we have this. Actually, let's zoom in. Let's zoom out a bit. There we go. So I can just do this and start creating some details, right? And the idea is to create something very organic, like a badly spread plasticine. But the important thing is the tiling effect. So if I just go here to the border, this is not going to match on this side, right? And that's because we have to tell ZBrush that we want this specific brush to be tileable. So again, let's open this one up. Let's get rid of the document palette. We don't need that. Let's go back to the brush and set the brush in here. Let me get rid of some of these brushes. And let's go to the curve, right? This sub palette has this wrap mode. So if I click on one, this one means that ZBrush is going to basically tile whatever you do. So if I start sculpting on this side, you see how it's being repeated on the other side. Same thing at the top, right? So this is exactly what we want. We want to be able to make this a tileable texture. So the idea is just to, start playing around with some details like so. And then if you want to make it a little bit more interesting, you can also hold the Alt key and then just press in, and that's kind of like the thumb spreading the clay. So you see, this is very, very basic, very simple, but you can already tell that this could work quite nicely, right? So let's just finish this one up, and I'm not going to spend too much time, and I'll show you why in a second. Now I'm going to use some custom brushes that I have for this specific thing, but if you want to just use the default brushes in ZBrush, you can totally do that by all means. Let's switch to another brush. I'm going to filter by D, so damp standard brush, this one right here. And with a smaller brush size, I can just make some cuts and then use the smooth brush and maybe hold the Alt key just to push this out. So you can spend, a lot of time building this specific set of details. Now, the only thing to remember is that, as you can see, I switched to a different brush, and the wrap mode is back to 0. So this is a setting that is depending on the brush. So if I do this right now, I'm not going to get any tiling effect. So make sure that this is done for every brush, including the smooth brushes. So let's do this one. So now we have tiling effects. And if I want to smooth this out, you see that the wrap mode, when I press Shift, also changes. Make sure that you set this to 1 while you hold in the Shift key. And that way you can also tile the smooth effect. Perfect. So that's how you create tileable textures or tileable details and maps in ZBrush. And this one is looking all right. What I'll do is I'm going to duplicate that one just to keep it, and then go back to the previous one. And I'm just going to go back in time to this point, right? So I still have this version, which is something that you can just follow along. And this is going to work just fine. I'm just going to show you in this one a custom brush. By the way, before I show you that, let me bring in the lightbox. If you go to the projects, and this is something that comes with ZBrush, and you open up the demo projects, you'll see here's the demo tree frog that I use. So you can double click this one and load it. All I did was just do a quick series measure and optimize it, create some UVs with the UV master, and that's what I sent to Painter just to test the materials. But you can do this with any model that you want. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the brush, and I'm gonna click on my custom brushes, and I have a few brushes here, a few packs. Most of these brushes pack are available in the ZBrushGuides store, so if you're interested in any of these, you can just go ahead and grab them from there. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the digital clay pack. So again, these are some custom brushes that I created for this specific look of clay. You know, for plasticine, it's kind of like the same thing. So if you already have the pack, you can basically do the same thing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and load maybe this one. This is much advanced brush that gives you this type of effect, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like spreading the clay. It works a lot faster than what I show you, but you can totally do it manually. I just want to speed this up a little bit. So I'm going to enable the wrap mode to 1 and increase my brush size. And that way I can also have tileable texture like so. All right. And yeah, so that's the only reason I would use kind of like a custom brush to work a little bit faster. And if I want to do some cuts as well, and there are a couple of brushes that are really good for that, or maybe like some kind of like cuts like these clean cuts, I'll do the same thing. I'll enable wrap mode, and with a large brush, I'm just gonna do a couple of them, not too many, like so, and then just smooth them out a bit. And this is kind of like the equivalent of like if you're working with your hands, sculpting something with real clay. If you have long nails or something, you might just cut through and create those indentations. But that is pretty much it, right? So you see, it's a slightly more complex than this one, but this one is going to work just fine if you just want to do it with the clay brushes. All right, and finally, let's create another details or another map that is going to have just details. And what I mean about details is that we will be able to add another layer of complexity. So this deformation is going to be kind of like the secondary forms, if you will, and this one will be more tertiary details. So let's do the same thing we did with the other one. So just subdivide this a few times, and perhaps this one needs to be subdivided even more. So let's subdivide it to 4 million polygons, so we have plenty of details. Now, so for the details, what you can do is find an alpha, for example, and just bring it in, and then use the standard brush with an alpha that matches whatever you want to create in terms of details. I'm going to try to recreate kind of like a fingerprint. So let's say something like this, right? You can change this to drag rect from the stroke type, select the alpha, and then you start doing this sort of stuff. If it is bulging like this, that is to do with the way that the alpha is being projected. So let's click on alpha, go to modify, and click on surface so that it doesn't do that bulging. So you can do that sort of thing to create the details that I'm going to do. And by the way, this drag rect also works with wrap mode. So you can just click and drag, and you'll see you still have a tileable texture. All right, so I'm going to reset this actually. Let's go here at the bottom, reset current brush. All right, so it's back to the normal standard brush. So I'm going to use one of the custom brushes that I have for the clay, like this fingerprint. And you'll see this fingerprint, it has the stroke, the drag dot. So basically, it's going to be consistent, the size. And that's very important in this case. So I'm just going to click, maybe larger than that, larger brush. We can actually subdivide this even more. So now we have probably, how many polygons we had? Yeah, 4 million. Subdivide one more time. We have 16 million polygons. Don't worry about the quantity, because this is going to be just an image. It doesn't have, it's not going to be any mesh, so don't worry about that. So now we have plenty of details like so. Alrighty. So what I'll do is, you can do it like this, and you can enable wrap mode, and then just place a few details like this. Or there's another brush that I might use, which gives you the same result. This one right here, this fingerprints overlay. That it's a lot faster just to create this sort of details. So let's undo that. But I just wanted to show you that you can find or create an alpha yourself and just drag it like so. I'm gonna click on one, and I'm gonna use my pen to add different levels of pressure. So you see, it's very subtle, but this is going to be work really well. All right, and maybe just to create some more custom fingerprints, reduce the brush size and also reduce the intensity. Maybe not that much. So this is a lot of back and forth until you find something that works well. So I'm just gonna do a few of these. Maybe some of them overlaying each other. And then we can also switch to a brush like the Trim Dynamic. And this is purely to so that it's not perfect, right? So that there's like some other areas that maybe after you press the plasticine or the clay, whatever you want to make, you spread them a little bit, so it sort of overrides the details. So this is kind of like what I'm after. And also, just for fun, let's go ahead and filter by the letter D again, damn standard, smaller brush size, and I just need to do, oops, something like this. I'm gonna turn off the wrap mode. Sometimes if you have lots of polygons, some brushes that are very complex, this one is not a good example, but some brushes that might be a bit too complex will lag. So just make sure that you're aware of the wrap modes. So if you have that at 0, it's not gonna wrap. So that's why I'm concentrating kind of like inside the square without going into the edges, just to add some cuts like that. But yeah, you can spend as much time as you want to in this process. All right, so now we have completed the process of building the maps. So we have the details and we have the deformation. I'm going to export both of these so you can see the difference. And it's actually really, really simple. Once you have gone through the process of creating the sculpting with tileable textures, or with tileable brushes, sorry, we just need to export them as images. So the first ones, these ones are going to be alphas. The detail is going to be a normal map. So let's get rid of the brushes. I'm going to click on alpha and drop that here on the left. And I'll do the same thing with, we can actually leave it there, but let's put the document here. So the alphas are going to capture the height map. In other words, the highest points are going to be white and the lowest points are going to be black, right? And everything in between, just for all the different levels, right? So what we need to do in the alpha palette is go down to the bottom where it says transfer, and if I click on grab doc, it's going to grab the document. So I'm going to make sure that I have this at full scale, so actual size, clicking on this button, right? And I'm going to click on grab doc. And as soon as I do that, you see, well, because I had the damn standard brush selected, it just adds that as an alpha, but it doesn't matter. What we need is the image itself. So it just creates that image in there. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Again, grab doc. And just for fun, let's do it with this one as well, even though I told you this is going to be the normal map, but just so you can see how easy it is. So you essentially have 3 different maps, right? So I'm just going to take these 3 and I'm going to export them out. All right, so now I have 3 maps, but this third one is going to be for details. So instead of having this as a black and white image, I want to have a normal map. And all I have to do really is just switch from the material here in the thumbnail to this normal map RGB. So I'm going to click on that, and ZBrush can grab this document as a normal map. That's all you have to do. So that's why I docked this document here, because we can do exactly the same thing. We can just export this document with this material as it is. So I'm going to click on export, and that's it. That's all we need to do from ZBrush. So at this point, just to do a quick recap, just from a single plane, we just duplicated and created 3 different maps. One that is just the deformation, or let's go back to the displacement or changes in kind of like the secondary shapes. We created 2 of those, one with a custom brush, one with the clay brush and pushing things in and out, and then some details with some fingerprints that we then exported as a normal map. That's all we need to do from ZBrush. So now let's go ahead and have some fun in 3D Painter. So I'll use this as an example, and I have some already created. So these are from a little plasticine pack that I put together, and they're pretty fun. Let me actually show you. So this one, for example, the badly mixed plasticine, if I just dropped it in there, and these are smart materials, so they're ready to go, and it creates that sort of look and feel, and it has some details as well, but it comes with all the layers, so you can just play around with that, with the amount of details, the amount of dirtiness and dust, anything that you want to change. You can also change the colors. All the layers are in there, so you can just change them to affect them differently. But yeah, there's a few of these ones that are pretty cool. Let me just show you. There is one, the advanced plasticine. So this one has lots of different things and lots of details, as you can see. It is gray, but you can also go to the base color and start changing all the colors, to make it like a red plasticine, right? And then just change some of the subtleties of that red and some of the lighter color as well. Right, so you just change the color of that plasticine, and now the dust or the dirt is pretty evident, so you can just either get rid of that altogether. You can basically customize it the way you want. But anyway, those are the things that I put together as a little pack. I'm just gonna show you how to build one of these yourself. So I'm gonna get rid of everything in here, just deleting all of that. Let's delete everything there, and there we go. So we started with a blank document, if you will. And you can use anything to test this out. Just export a sphere with UVs, and you'll be able to do the same thing. All right, so I'm gonna click on this icon just to create a new fill layer, and that fill layer has obviously all the channels enabled. And before I start, I'm gonna bring in those maps that I created in ZBrush. So let's drag and drop them anywhere here in the library, and Painter is gonna ask me what I wanna do with this. So I'm gonna select all of them, change these undefined, and I'm gonna click on texture, because that's what they are. And I'm gonna click on add it to this frog plasticine project. So import that, and if it is automatically filtered by project, you'll see all of those maps in there. So these ones are two of the same. I should have just imported three, but anyway, this one is the same as the normal map. So the cool thing now is that we're going to be able to control, let's say, the details separately from the displacement and all of that. And that's why we have one that is a black and white image or a height map, and another one that is a normal map. So this one, I'm just going to rename it details. I'm going to create another one actually, and I'm going to rename this one height, right? Or let's call it height. Cool. All right, so I'm also going to right click on this layer, and I'm going to give it a color, just a blue color, and this one is going to be yellow, so that I can refer back to it easily. So let's select this one and toggle off height. And in the details, I'm going to turn everything off except the NRM, which is basically the normal. So click on that, and I'm going to take this one, and I'm just going to drop it in the normal. So as soon as I do that, you'll see we have something happening, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. But obviously, it is way too big, and it doesn't look right. So for that, let's scroll up a bit, and we just need to change how this map, how this tileable texture is being projected, and how much are we tiling, and that's why we have this tiling here. So let's change this to triplanar. So triplanar projection is going to have this nice box that you can move around, and you don't have to have like perfect UVs. It's going to basically project the same texture from all these sides or faces from the cube, right? And then you can use either the tiling here to scale this up and down, right? You can kind of like see where the details are. And if I take this manipulator and I can move it around, I can also press the letter E on my keyboard to rotate, or W to move, or R to scale, and those ones are in here. So I can move, rotate, or scale. And if I scale it, that's kind of like the same thing as changing the tiling, right? But we do it interactively from this point. So we can actually leave this tiling at 1 and then just play just with the scaling like this. The tiling is going to be actually more visible if you set this to UV mapping or UV map projection. But because we're using triplanar, we can just get away with this. All right, so now we have the details done, and those are in the normal map alone. And let's go ahead and bring in the other one. So let's turn this off so that you don't see that. Turn on the height, and we're gonna do the same thing, but turning everything off except the height map. And I'm just gonna bring the simple one first, drop it in there. And again, you see there's something going on, but it's a little bit weird. So those cuts are because of the UV projection. So let's click on that, click on triplanar. Same thing, we can just scale this up and down like so. And it might be too strong, right? You see there's a lot of changes. So what we can do is control the intensity of this map with some levels. So let's go to this magic one here. I'm gonna click on levels. This is the levels added to this map. And I'm gonna change the target to be from base color to be height. Right, so you see now we have the histogram here, and we can just go ahead and tweak this. So that we can just literally, like you would do this in Photoshop, just change the intensity of these details. And that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll just scale this a bit more or something like that. Again, you can move this cube and play around with how it is placed. So I think this is fine. I'm just gonna change this a bit more. And if this is not enough, right? If the levels is not enough, by the way, you can also switch to the high channel and see what's happening in here. But if the levels are not enough, you can also go to the channels here, select height, and change the intensity, just like an opacity kind of thing. So you can see we change that a bit. And if you want, you can actually invert the details. So you can click on invert here and then just invert the effect. All right. But yeah, that's roughly what this map is. What I'll do is I'm actually gonna use the one that I originally created with the custom brush. I think it will work a bit better. So I'm gonna click on that, drop it in here just to replace it, and there we go. So you see, it's a bit more interesting. And what I can do again, try planner. I'm gonna scale this up. All right, and I'm gonna reduce this slightly. So it's all about the subtleties. Just want to make sure I have something in there. But now I'm going to go ahead and mix it with the details. So now we have both displacement, or like changes that are a little bit larger, and we also have details, but we can control them separately, right? You could do the same thing as another layer of details with just the black and white fingerprints as well. But yeah, just wanted to show you one can be a normal map and another one could be a hide map, but you can combine the two. All right, so now that we have these ones, let's go ahead and delete this original layer. I'm gonna click on a new fill layer, and this is going to be the base color. So what we can do is remove everything but the color. And I like to keep it like this. So I like to have different channels in different layers, especially if I want to create a smart material that then, you know, I can share or that I can save as a template so that I can use it after. So let's make a green material or a green plasticine. So something like this, right? And just by doing that, you see with a little bit of details like we added and some color, we already have something pretty decent. But obviously we want to create something, you know, slightly more realistic. And I just want to variate the color a bit. So let's call this one green base. And I'm going to write, and by the way, let's switch back to the base color so you can see the color. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate layers, or Control D. And I'm going to call this one green var, as in variation. And I'm going to change the color slightly, a bit more vibrant and lighter. And I'll do the same thing again, just duplicate layers. This one is going to be color var 2, right? And this one might be a bit more towards the blue tones and a bit darker. We literally just have 3 layers that are providing 3 different colors, right? So the base one and these 2. So I'm going to select the second one and I'm going to click on this icon to create a black mask. So it is now hiding everything of that color. And with the mask selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on this to remove this. And I'm going to go to the textures and I'm going to type noise. And let's find some interesting noise, maybe like something like this purling noise. And we need to drop this into somewhere, but right now we don't have anything. So with the mask selected, let's click on the magic one again, click on add fill, and that's going to create a fill layer just for the mask. So a black and white fill layer. So we can just go ahead and drag and drop this 3D purling noise in here. And hopefully you can see that there is some variation in color happening based on this mask. So I can change the balance, right? And you see what is happening. You can change the contrast. I might actually change the projection to be triplanar just to be consistent, and maybe scale things like so, not too much. Again, this is going to be very, very subtle. Hopefully you can see. I mean, it's not as subtle actually. Let's change it a bit and change the balance as well. So if I turn this on and off, it's very subtle changes in the color. And let's go ahead and repeat the process so that you understand what I did in the third one. So again, let's go ahead and click on black mask and let's click on add fill layer. And this time I'm going to use something else. Let's try a grunge map. So I'm going to type grunge. Let's try this one, the grunge dust strikes or streak. Let's click on that. And if you want to actually see what you are changing in terms of the alpha or the mask, you can hold the Alt key and click on the alpha or the mask, and you can see what is going on. So the same thing with this grunge. I'm going to change it to triplanar, and we can change the hardness transition and maybe rotate things around, scale this up and down. I think something like this. And of course, we can change the balance and the contrast. And then we can click back on this layer so we can actually see what's going on. That's looking pretty cool. And of course, the last thing that we need to do is being able to play around with the roughness. So I'm going to go ahead and click on another layer. This one, we're going to call it rough control. And this could be at the top of everything. And in fact, you can just move these things around. It doesn't really matter because we're not overriding the channels. As you can see, if I select this one, it's only the color channel, whereas this one is just the normal channel. So we're not overriding anything. So this one is going to be just the rough. So let's click on that one. So we're gonna leave this one as rough control, but we're gonna duplicate it. And I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna call it rough var. So we're gonna variate this as well. All right, so the rough control is just gonna be exactly what I have here. It's gonna literally control the roughness. So we only have this slider that makes it like super shiny or like very, very matte. So let's put something in between, a little bit greasy, right? And then we have the rough variation. And just so that you can see things properly, I'm gonna push this all the way down so that it's like super reflective, like a, you know, very oily or a wet clay. And I'm gonna do the same thing that I did for the layers of color. So let's click create a black mask, and let's bring in a fill layer. And I'm gonna use another grunge map, maybe something like this, that is not as strong. The difference between the black and white color is more, it's more like a grayscale, this one. So grunge leak spot, I'm gonna put that in here. And that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and set this up to triplanar. And then we can change the balance as well. So let's hold the Alt key to access that mask. We might need to increase the size this a bit, and we can play with the balance again, right? So basically, if I go back in here, there's only gonna be some bits and pieces. Hopefully you can see from here. If I rotate the light around, you see there's some bits and pieces that are going to be super reflective because that's what I have at the moment. But I can then, with this layer, and this is what I love about this process, that is non-destructive, I can take this layer and just change this a bit. So it is slightly different in terms of the, like the variation is slightly different from the roughness control, but it's not that much of a difference. So it's very subtle, right? So you can play around with this and say, for example, you know what? I want this to be like a really matte plasticine. I can go back to rough control and set this to be very, very matte, and then take this rough variation, which at the moment is very, very subtle here, and say, you know what, I actually want more of this. So you select the grunge leaks and change the balance, right? So you have total control of that. So let's go back. I kind of like the greasiness of this one, and then on the variation as well. All right, but that is in a nutshell how I would set up something like this, right? There are a few more layers in the smart materials that I created, but that's just because I wanted to add a bit of dust and some, you know, fluffs and things like that that you might pick from a real world scenario. But let's go ahead and convert this into a smart material that you can reuse, and then I can jump into the stager so that I can show you how to render it very quickly. So I want to select everything, all the layers, and I'm going to hold Control and G to group them. So I created this group, and I'm going to call this one Green Plasticine Tutorial, right? So that's just a folder that has all those layers, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on Create Smart Material. So now Painter is going to create a smart material that I can reuse. So I can just drag and drop this into the other meshes, and it should work in the same way. There we go. Now in the sphere, you see that it's a little bit bigger, or it has more textile density. So what I can do is go back to, in fact, let's just delete this one. We can go back and tweak a few things. So I can either toggle this on and off, or I can just go to the actual mask that I generated, and I can play around with the balance or the tiling effect. So I can make this a little bit bigger, just so that it matches the rest, right? And I'll do the same thing with this, although the third one is fine. And that's pretty much it. So once you're happy with assigning all of these materials, and if you want, just to give you an extra trick, if you want to variate just the color, what you can do is, once you have your smart material, you can click on this icon. Let's drop it in here as well. So create another fill layer just with color. And let's say this is going to be a red, a red clay or a red plasticine. You can actually change how this is blended. So the base color or albedo is going to be blended as just color. So you can click on color, and then you still have the, you know, all the saturation and the brightness in there. So you will be able to just basically create all sorts of different colors with the same material just by adding an extra layer in there, which is pretty cool. So let's make something like an orange one, and let's go into the eye, and I'm going to do the same thing just to repeat the process. Let's make this, I don't know, a yellowish tone, and set this to color, and there we go. All right, so now for the rendering, because I'm using Substance 3D Painter and I want to render in Substance 3D Stager, it is just a click. So let's click on File, I'm going to go to send to, and I'm going to click on send to Substance 3D Stager. So Painter is going to take the model, both the model and the textures and everything, and the materials, everything, and it's going to set this up in Substance 3D Stager. So that's what is loading at the moment. All right, so here we are in Substance 3D Stager. I'm not going to cover all the UI. It's actually very, very intuitive software. I'm just going to scale this up. So I'm going to press this button or this UI element, hold the shift key just so that it's proportional. And actually, let's move it down, and it will snap to the ground when it hits it, which is pretty cool. There we go. So now I know it is in the ground. And just by, importing this into 3D Stager, and this is not even the rendering settings, you kind of tell like this is a pretty cool plasticine material, right? So let's go ahead and set up the render. I have a few images. So these are just photographs that I did, or that I took from a quick set that I set up for plasticine. There's about 250 images from different angles and different scenarios. So that's part of the pack as well, like a bonus. If you're interested in these plasticine materials, you can just download it, and it just comes with those. I'm just gonna go ahead and load this one, and all I have to do is click on it and just drag it anywhere here in the 3D viewport. And as soon as I do that, Stager is going to automatically create a camera, which I can double click and call render. All right. And it has that image in the background, right? Now, you can also, depending on the image, you can try to match the perspective. Sometimes it does a really good job. I don't think it's going to work in this case, but if I click on match image, you'll see it can sort of like match the output size, which is the aspect ratio, with some lights that match the environment, and it sometimes can match the camera. So I'm not gonna do that. Instead, I'm just gonna use the grid lines, and because in my set I have a similar grid, I can sort of like try to find the same angle. So that's kind of what I want to achieve. There we go. And then I can click anywhere here or go to view and turn off the grid so that I don't see it. And actually, let's place this one there. And I'm going to bring in the gizmo. So I'm going to select the entire frog, the folder that I brought in from Painter, and I'm going to move it up so that, if I leave it where it is, you'll see that the shadows are right in the floor, which is not what I want. I want to kind of like make it on top of this. I don't know what this is, just something to hold it together. Might be too flimsy, but it's all right. Maybe let's go ahead and rotate things around so we can get a better angle. All right, so that is pretty cool. But we kind of like match the angle of the camera and all of that, but the lighting is still not necessarily the right one. And that is for a few reasons. Right now, the environment that we have is nothing. We have just a basic lighting. So we can change all of that and create our own custom lighting. Before I do anything, I'm just going to lock this so that I don't accidentally change that. And I'm also going to lock the camera again so that I don't accidentally change it. So let's go to this tab here on the starter assets, and I'm going to click on lights, and let's actually scroll this, move this down. I'm going to go to environment lights, and I'm going to try to find something that sort of matches the overall lighting of this background image, which is pretty diffuse. You'll see there's some shadows, but those shadows are pretty diffuse. So I'm going to look for something. Let's go for this soft light. Just drop that in there. And that, gives you something a lot softer, but it's still not quite right. And the reason for that is that this is just a preview, right? This is not necessarily rendering things. So if I want to see the real render, I just need to go to ray tracing and enable that. So as soon as I do that, Stager should start rendering, and you see we have a much nicer render, right? So this already looks a lot better. But I want to try to recreate the sort of like the same shadows and the same cast shadows in here. So what I can do is go back here at the top of the lights, and I'm going to add an area light. So I'm going to click and drag, and as I drag it, you see it just sort of changes based on the normal of the model. So I can just literally paste it in there, and it's going to be perpendicular to that normal. All right, so that's it. Let's move that out of the way so that it's a little bit, in these photos, there is a window on the right-hand side in my living room. So I'm going to try to recreate this. And you can change the exposure by selecting the actual area light. You see you have access to the properties, and you can just change that, change the lighting, the color, and all of that. So maybe just add a bit more of that exposure. And if I want, I can also rotate the environment around. So let's go back to the environment and use this rotation tool to move things around. So all I want to do with this rotation is try to find the main light. So you see that there's a very soft shadow in here that is coming from the environment. All right, so basically I have the environment light that is giving me most of the lighting that I need. Then I have this area light that I can toggle on and off just to give me some highlights, kind of like the key light. But then I remember that I had some light set up at the back as well. And just to highlight this edge a bit, we can go ahead and drop another area light around here, right? And I think this should be all right. I just change the color, sorry, the intensity or the exposure, and change the intensity, and then change the color to a warmer tone because I had a warmer light set up in there. But you know, those are kind of like, let's call it artistic decisions. So if you don't like that, you can just totally change that. But you see how easy this is. Now, the final touch to really integrate this into the background in Stager, which is really cool, is, you know, try to match the depth of field of that image. So you see the centerpiece of this area that I actually focus the camera on this area so that I can put anything and it will be on focus, but the rest is pretty blurry. So what I can do is select the render camera, and I can go to depth of field. Actually, let's toggle this off so that I can edit it. Enable depth of field, and I can increase the blur amount, right? Actually, before I do that, let's set the focal point. So I'm going to click on set focus point, and I'm going to click on the eyes of the frog. And now you can see we can play around with this and try to match the photo even more, right? So you see the hand here, it's a little bit more out of focus, but the rest is pretty sharp. So that makes it a lot more realistic. So this is pretty cool, right? Like we have gone like full circle from ZBrush, where we created the resources, then put it all together in 3D Painter to create the material, and then with a single click bring everything into 3D Stager. And now with a nice background image, we can render something pretty cool, right? So to finalize all of this, all I have to do is go to the render tab and just click render, and it will just render something like this. But just before I do that, I want to show you the scenes for this so that you can see they're exactly the same. These images that I showed you at the beginning of the tutorial, they're just using the custom materials that I created for the pack and other images that are also part of the pack, but the setup is exactly the same. So I just want to show you that. So I'm going to go to File, Open Recent, and I'm going to click on the Rainbow Plasticine Frog. All right, here we go. So as you can see, it's exactly the same thing. So we have one key light or one area light, then we have a secondary area light, we have the environment, we have the frog that came from 3D Painter, we have the camera. This is kind of like the other frog. Oh, sorry, no, this one is the previous frog. So this one is the gray one. Let me just show you. So this is the gray frog, but you know, you can import both of them and just test what works best. It's just that the gray color doesn't really match the environment. I wanted to go for more of a you know, colorful frog, since this is the image that I have. That is pretty much it, really. One thing that I want to show you just to wrap up this tutorial is that you can, if for some reason you have like a more reflective surface in the photo or in the background, you can actually fake an even more of an integration with a fake, or not fake, but a reflections in the ground. So if you go to the ground here, selecting the environment and going to the properties, you can actually add reflections. So if I set it to 100%, you see this is almost like in a mirror, and then I can also blur or change the roughness of that reflection. So I can blur like this. So in this surface, there's actually a bit of reflection, so we can play around with the roughness, because it's obviously kind of like a matte that is really rough, and I can also change the opacity of that roughness. So that really helps to integrate things, right? So we have the shadow, and we have a bit of reflections, maybe less than that, right? So it really feels part of this whole render. And again, that's all there is to it. In the render tab, you can set a few parameters. You can go for the full resolution, set the preset to high or ultra. Obviously, I always go for high. Ultra might be a little bit too much, but the high one gives you plenty of samples. And then you can set the camera resolution. This resolution right here is based on the image that I imported. So if I go back to design, you'll see it's the same pixels or the aspect ratio that I have in here. And then go back to render. And yeah, I just set up this to be a 16-bit or 8-bit or 32-bit, whatever, or a PNG. Set my my path. I'm going to render in desktop. And yeah, if you have multiple cameras, actually, you could select them here. So let me just show you how that works. I could literally just click on an icon here to create a new camera. And now I can rotate around something like that, right? So in order to see through the camera, you can click on this icon. So I can click on this camera to go to this one and to this one, right? So at render time, if you have multiple cameras set up, just go to render and enable both cameras, and it will render both. All right, so that's it for this long tutorial. Hopefully this has been of help. And like I said, if you're interested in the little Plasticine pack, I'll put a link into the description as well if you wanna grab that. But yeah, hopefully this gives you a full idea of how to create your own Plasticine materials and the different tools that I would use personally to create something like that. All right, I'll leave it here and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.